All right, everyone, welcome back to this week's episode of Getting In, a College Coach Conversation. We have explored in some depth the Apply Texas application in the first segment of today's show, and we want to turn our attention now to the westernmost state. Well, it's not the westernmost state, it's the big western state, California, the UC application. This is probably the application that is most popular as an alternative to the Common App because it is required. So instead of the Apply Texas being an option for students who want to apply to UT and Texas A&M, the UC application is the only option. It's the only game in town if you want to apply to any of the University of California schools. And so it's very important that you understand as listeners what to expect from it. We have one of our UC experts joining us on the show today, Sarah Calvert-Kubram. Hey, Sarah, welcome back to the program.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
It's great to have you. And the UC application is one of those things where we love as experts to dig our hands in every year and see what's new and different. Let's just start with the basics. Why don't you help people to understand the role that the UC application plays in the admissions landscape and just anything that you would want families to know about as they're going in to create their account for the first time?
Perfect. Well, first thing, rising seniors, or if you're in California, you probably already started senior year. The application is live. It went live August 1st, so you can get in there, you can start working on it. What I love is that it is one application for all of the University of California systems. So whether you're applying to Merced, Santa Cruz, LA, whatever, it's the same application. It is a different application than if you're applying to private colleges or other states, or even the Cal State system in California, but one application can be sent to multiple campuses, no extra essays or anything like that. What I would say is that akin to the Common application, there are the areas you might be familiar with. So your demographics, your contact information. There is an activities section. There are an essay section. There's also a section where you tell them which campuses you want to apply to. The thing to know is that you just pay an additional application fee for each campus you apply to. And here you go. Ian's pulling up the application. A lot of this, frankly, is quite similar to the Common application and other application platforms. I'd say a big difference that a few that I want to call out. One is that under academic history, all of the classes and grades that you have from high school, from summer classes, you name it, you self-report. So your high school is not submitting a transcript as part of your application. This is where having another person, a family member, a friend, whoever, spot checking for accuracy, sit down and do it with you, double check it is key, because let's say you're admitted to UC Santa Barbara, yay, you've paid your deposit, next summer you're college bound. You have to have your high school send a final high school transcript to Santa Barbara, and they're going to check it for accuracy. They're going to see, is Ian the person he says he is? Did he take the classes he said he did? Did his grades meet the bill, etc.? So accuracy is really important here. So they're going to double check that. So self-reported is one, I think, really important thing to note. There are sections for college classes you've taken, for high school classes. You just pay attention to the details. If there's anything kind of unusual or different that you're having a hard time explaining, you'll see, and for those looking in our video, there's an additional information section at the bottom there. That's a great space to use if you're like, let's say I took a online Spanish enrichment class to be more fluent than what I could get at my high school. It wasn't credit bearing. I didn't have a grade. I'm not sure it fits as an activity, but I want to make sure that they know if there's some context, or there's a class you really wanted that your high school couldn't offer. If there's something that you want to give context, use that space.
And Sarah,
Yeah.
one of the things that I think just popped up on the those who are watching this on our social media who can see the screen share of the actual application, a lot of the options for adding further information and giving further clarification are not available to you until you actually go through the basics of adding in what is my high school, just giving some of that initial background info. The UC doesn't really let you jump around from place to place and just put in information here and there. They want you to go through a more linear process in terms of the application, which is quite a bit different from the Common App. And I just want to express to everyone who might be diving into that UC application for the first time, you're going to find that, you're going to encounter that. So don't get into a position where you're especially concerned about the fact that you can't find some of the things that we're talking about here. It'll often be triggered by the logic created by the user experience team at the UC application, and you'll be able to engage with some of that content.
Excellent point. And I tell my students, sit down and kind of do it in order, and it tells you that their help text is actually pretty helpful. It says, no, you need to go back and do this.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
And one other thing, I want to really underscore that accuracy, because a lot of students think, oh, they don't need to see my transcripts. That's great. You really have to be sure that everything that's reflected on your high school transcript is being entered in to the letter in the same way on the application. And I think one of the places I've seen students that can get into some trouble is if they are guessing about, well, how many units is this class? I'll just put this in, or like, changing the title, or thinking, well, this is not an AP class, but it's advanced. I'm going to put advanced, even if it's not on the transcript. So you have to put in exactly what it says on your transcript into this space, because they will be checking against that. And if there are errors, then you might have a re-review. You might have a re-review triggered, and nobody wants that after they've already been admitted to a UC.
The other two things I'd say about that is California students are probably familiar with this, but out-of-state ones might not be. Everything for the UCs, you can look on their website. They have what's called the A through G criteria classes that you have to take, which are the minimums to be considered for admission to the UCs. And they also use this to see, have you hit those minimums? And that's another reason why approximating or guessing is not wise. I often tell students who are confused, go talk to your school counselor, because all California high schools, public or private, have their classes pre-vetted of which A through G criteria they fulfill for both the UCs and the Cal States. So it's wise to kind of go back to the source of the high school and say, they'll know, because this is a very common piece. I think the other one, just to kind of quickly call out, if a student's working on the Common App and the UC app, the activities and honors award section, it's different.
Quite a bit different, in fact.
Yeah. What I find for students who are working on both the UC app and the Common App is it can be really great to do the UC activities section first. And here's why. They combine activities, jobs, awards, honors. It's all in one section, and you categorize what they are, but you get to list up to 20 total items. Whereas on the Common App, it's up to 10 activities and up to 5 honors. So a maximum in total of 15 things in these categories. So starting with a bigger number for a student who has them feels less stressful. You're not yet thinking about cutting and dicing. The other thing that Ian's showing on the screen right now is when you describe the activities, in some of the boxes, you have up to 350 characters.
Which feels enormous compared to the comments. Like 350, wow, I could say so much.
Yeah, and if you haven't done this, you're not in the weeds yet, you get 150 characters for each item on the Common App. So I just find it's way less stressful for students to start with the UC and then cut, dice, trim for the Common App. So I think that's
good advice. That's good advice. And I think, one of the things that I have students do when they're doing their Common App is like, let's start really big and put everything that you think you might need to include, and then we'll trim it down to 150 and make it a little bit more efficient.
Yeah.
But you don't have to do that as much in this particular space. I don't think that means that you're aiming for 350 characters. If you can do a good job of describing your involvement in an activity in 150, go for it. Yeah. You don't have to make them read more.
I agree.
What about this? I mean, we get a lot of questions on this, and I have a suspicion you'll answer in a particular way, but how it says, estimate how much time you spend on this activity, but it's important to be as accurate as possible. And then they ask for hours per week and weeks per year. A lot of students get concerned about this. Like, are they going to check? How do they know how much time I've spent? What's your advice to students as they're filling out this section?
I've actually recently had students, an athlete and a robotics team member, both angst over this, right? Because during a competition, you'll have this spike of 30 hours a week, and the rest of the year, 10 hours a week. And what do I do? What I tend to do is I tell students to look at their whole year, kind of get a sense of, the ebbs, the flows, maybe do some math, quantify it. But what I tell them is that the essence here is that the Office of Admissions wants to know how big are your commitments, how big is your dedication, how busy are you? It's a
Yeah.
different picture if you're a academically thriving student who does nothing outside of the classroom versus a person who does a lot. It also is different to do one activity deeply, like a 20-hour-a-week job, or,
Right.
you know, a sport that keeps you really busy, or whatever it might be. If it's a big time commitment versus an hour a week, these tell different signals and different messages. I would not angst over, is this precisely accurate? Because
Yeah.
frankly, that's impossible. But I would look at averages. I'd say, okay, there are 3 weeks out of the year where I do 30 hours. 20 weeks out of the year, I do three. Let's add it all up, average it, divide it, put it in there. But you're
That's
just
fine.
trying to tell the picture, how busy you are, what is the commitment.
And I think that your descriptions can help, right? So if you have the what did I do and you're talking about
Yeah.
robotics, it's like throughout the year, I work on our basic robot, but then 1 week out of the year, we have, intensive competitions and that
Mhm.
requires extra time. So
Yeah.
that's something that you could put as well. I also want to call attention because you did mention a job, you mentioned sports. There are different categories here and everything is underneath the same umbrella. So we've got awards and honors, we've got educational preparation programs, the traditional extracurricular activities and more. And it's important to know that they're going to ask different questions based on what kind of category you choose. So if you choose work experience, they're going to ask, well, where did you work? And then what's the description of the company or the organization where you worked? What's your job title? What are your job responsibilities? So like Sarah says, it can be quite helpful to do the UC first because there's all this extra information here that might not be captured on the Common App, which
Mhm.
treats every single one of those 10 activities the same way in terms of
Right.
what you provide.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I know we have a few minutes, but I'm thinking, should we talk about the essays just really briefly? What do you think?
I mean, I'm always game to talk about essays. Before we do that, I want to talk about the essays, but I just really quickly, let's talk
Yeah.
about campuses and majors,
Yeah.
because I think that there is sometimes some consternation around, especially choosing majors. I'm going to leave
Mm-hmm.
this as Sarah,
Mm-hmm.
I think Joy said in the previous segment, whenever you leave something, make sure you press save. I didn't do that here. Don't be like me. Definitely make sure you press save. But what we're looking at here is every single one of the UC campuses. I've said I'm going to apply to all of them because I'm crazy. But you get a chance to choose a major and choose an alternate major in these spaces. And that's true for every single one of the campuses. I wonder if you just have any broad advice that you would give for families as they're thinking about, especially that alternate major
Mm-hmm.
and the relationship that it should have to that
Mm-hmm.
primary major.
Quick, I'm going to flip the script. You're not crazy. If you are UC bound and want in-state tuition into California, apply to all of them.
All right, great. I'm smart, it turns out. Thanks, Sarah. I appreciate that.
But no, so what I would say is there are a couple things. Think about what matters to you most. Is it the major or is it the campus? Are
Mm,
you bound and determined on being a nursing student or computer science, something that like, I must do this? Well, if that's the case, it can decrease your chance of admission and you're going to have to research that for each campus. But you want to authentically say that major because this is a
mhm.
complicated topic, but you may not be able to get into it later once you're at the UC. So I would really think, you know, am I undecided and I'm going to put a major that, yeah, I think this is fine. I might want to do history. Cool. Then put it all the campuses, be open minded that you might change later. But if it's a major that can be hard to get into, and that's a different conversation for another day, and you
Sure.
know that's your priority, put it. The alternate major should also be something that you are authentically interested in. Each UC campus approaches this a little bit differently, but broadly speaking, in some way or another, they're going to be looking at, can they admit you to the campus and can they admit you to the major in some way or another? They're considering these things. And I think that you want to really reflect more than anything, are these things that you want to do? Also, maybe do some research with the UC campuses to find
Yeah.
out if they could impact your chance of admission, and or how flexible and easy is it to change majors once you're at the UC, especially if you are authentically undecided and or very wedded to a specific majors. I think those two extremes, it's worth having a conversation, but it varies from UC campus to UC campus. So you need to do a bit of research at that point.
Yeah, and the research is helpful. The UCs are great. And I think one of the things that you often say to families, Sarah, is pick up the phone.
Yeah.
Call someone at these
Yeah.
admission offices. And I think it's because when you were in admission, you love when people called and they had questions and
Mhm.
you could point them in the right direction for your institutions. And it's great advice, because a lot of people will sit here and say, what does it mean if I do this? What do I do? Ask somebody, send an email. We really encourage the students to be the ones doing that in those cases, but there is quite a bit that you can explore and learn about if you reach out to people who know.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we've just plowed right through that. We got to have another session on the personal questions. I thought this was going to be quick, but of course nothing is quick when we're talking about the UC
That's
application.
true.
Is there anything else that you want families to know? Any words of encouragement as they dive in and get familiar
Mhm.
with this whole system here? I'm gonna stop sharing my screen so we can look at
Mhm.
each other, but anything else you want families to know?
This is going to sound cheesy, but I really mean it. When you first log into the UC application the first time, it tells you it's your time to shine. And it might sound cheesy, but it is sincere that the UCs are looking for the positive things, the things that you bring to the table in the application. This is your chance to celebrate your accomplishments, to say what you've done. They're not looking for the negative, and they mean that. As Ian knows, we have colleagues who have worked at UCs, and they said, yeah, that's true. They are
Yeah,
really looking at the positive. So when they say it's your time to shine, be proud. Don't be afraid to share your accomplishments. This is your time to kind of showcase that and know that the UCs really do want to see you stand out in that way. And I think own that mindset as you navigate this process. And again, perhaps cheesy, but sincere.
that's all right. We got to have a little bit of cheese every now and then, because it's a stressful process, and so a little bit of that good vibe kind of stuff is great for all of our listeners. Thanks a lot, Sarah. Big
Yeah,
help.
thank you.
I
Yeah.
appreciate it. When we come back, we're going to talk about the Cal Grant program. And so if you don't know anything about the Cal Grant, you're going to want to stick around and hear from our finance experts. Don't go away.